Hello and welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today's guest, Chip Fridrich, former Vanderbilt baseball pitcher. We will talk about the VandyBoys for a bit. We thank our sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news brought to you by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt has a 3-game series with Auburn this weekend in baseball starting Thursday. All 3 games will be shown either on the ESPN family of networks, which includes the SEC network, or Watch ESPN, which you can find on the Watch ESPN app or ESPN's app now as it stands. And also one more baseball note, the May 12th game against Missouri has now been moved to noon. Chip Fridrich is with us now. He's a former Vanderbilt baseball pitcher, has done some color commentary work for the baseball team. Chip, thanks for joining us. Hope you're well today.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be on with you again after a good weekend for baseball for the Commodores and a good week in general, 4 wins. And I was able to watch those games. I was in Florida for the Easter vacation, got to watch all 3 of those courtesy of ESPN Plus on 2 of them and the SEC Network on the other. So good wins there by the club as they kind of get down to the home stretch here and got some opportunities to distance themselves and hopefully catch Georgia as we approach the end of the season here. But good week for the Commodores in baseball overall.
You know, you were a former pitcher, so you were more qualified to assess this than I am. It was kind of an interesting offensive weekend. It was rather hot and cold. You had all the home runs. You also had a lot of strikeouts. I thought Alabama's relievers made a lot of pitchers' pitches at good counts. I thought their pitching staff didn't look bad. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look and see how many of the home runs were hanging breaking balls or belt-high fastballs. But I thought Alabama, for a lot of the weekend, pitched pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Friday night game was, when you had Finnerty, didn't pitch all that bad, even though he gave up 6 earned runs. And he went in some counts. He had some pitches that were in a favorable part of the account. There were 2 strike pitches that he made mistakes on. And, their strategy was to just mix pitchers up and go lefty, righty, and change velocity. And, they were overmatched. I mean, Alabama's, 24-15, and they're 4-12 in the comp. Well, actually worse than that now. They're 24-17 and 4-14. But that's a team that's just on the rebuilding process, got a lot of youth. Threw a lot of young arms out there against the Commodores this weekend. But it wasn't a horrific performance by their staff. They had some guys who threw really well. And of course, on the Sunday game, it was the closest game of all the weekend. You had a kid that, they pieced it together kind of with 5 pitchers, but, only gave up 2 runs to a team that had been just absolutely crushing the baseball all weekend. So that just goes to show you too, Chris, it's hard to sweep in this league. I mean, I know Tennessee swept Kentucky, looks like they're at the bottom's falling out literally up in Lexington. And it's a great time for them to be on the schedule late in the year, but it's hard to sweep teams. I don't care how you do on Friday and Saturday night. This league's got enough balance still, even with a team that's only got 4 conference wins. They're going to battle you. And Alabama just did that on Sunday. And I'm glad for the team's sake, as well as they played Friday and Saturday night, that they came away with a win Sunday, because that's a team, if you're going to compete in this league for championships, for regular season championships, you got to sweep them. You got to win all 3 games. That's a game that will come to bite you back if they hadn't gotten that win on Sunday, and they did. So Alabama didn't play that too bad on the pitching. I think the power of this lineup that we've talked about all year, the power bats with all the home runs that happened, really came to the forefront and was kind of the star of the show this weekend.
Let's back up and talk big picture. This is the time of year when I'm always tracking RPIs and big wins and stuff like that. And once you get to this point, once you were in great shape, which they are, it becomes really hard to undo the work that you have banked, barring a disaster. I will get the exact number to you in a minute because I need to check it this morning after some games being played. But I was looking through some stuff. I looked at probably 40 teams, anybody remotely had a chance to host. I think at this point, Vanderbilt, what it has to do to get a national seed may be more doable than anybody in the country in terms of considering what it has already banked in terms of wins, RPI. I think now their strength of schedule is, according to Warren Nolan, I think now number one in the country. There are just very few holes in their resume, and the number of games that they have to win combined with the fact that they played the tough teams and all these games left are pretty winnable games. Again, they may be in better position for a national seed and maybe the number one overall than anybody in the country right now. It would take a complete collapse for them to not even host at this point.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And there's the schedule, as you mentioned, is way favorable than it's been at any time, I think, in the Corbin era going down the stretch. And we talked about that last week as far as the records, the conference records of the opponents going down the stretch is way in their favor. And, of course, it's the way it is as far as the way the schedule lined up. No Ole Miss, no Mississippi State, no LSU, which those would be three teams, 9 games there that'd be hard to deal with. So, yeah, I agree with you. Last year, of course, they hosted Super Regional because of some things that happened in other regionals, and they get it over Mississippi State, and Mississippi State had to come here and kind of, I don't want to say they backdoored their way into hosting a Super Regional, but they earned it with the Clemson Regional win. But to really solidify yourself the way that the NCAA is supposed to be doing it now, and whether they truly are, a couple years ago it was about geography and saving money. I don't think the NCAA has to worry about that anymore. You really, truly need to give the teams that are national seeds 1 through 8 a favorable schedule, especially if you're 1, 2, and 3. You need to be technically hosting the worst regional that's out there in a super if you were to come out of it. So I think things are lining up pretty good for this team. And like you just said, without just an utter collapse, I don't think the SEC tournament's going to matter. You saw what happened last year. It's just, those things is kind of like the NHL and hockey. I mean, I told my little boy driving to school today, I said, well, the Predators, the way they did it really just shows you need to get in the tournament and you chips, fall where they will. But in this case, it matters a little bit more and should as far as where the NCAA should place you. But this team, the schedule is in their favor. Their RPI and their strength of schedule is in their favor. And again, I don't think the SEC tournament is going to have any bearing, although Tim Corbin wants to do well in that. He always is, then they have done well. This team's going through exams this week, and I've mentioned on your shows before, this is when Vanderbilt teams seem to turn on the engines a little bit and go into fifth gear once that's over because of the responsibilities of not being in class. They're over with, and that they can concentrate on baseball, and the academic load is not there as it would be with some other schools in the SEC. So, yeah, looking at all the numbers, where they lie, schedule, where they should be, and matched against going down the stretch, it's definitely more than as far as in the Tim Corbin era going down a stretch, except for that one team that. And I thought, what was that record with Tony Kemp and that crew? Was it 27-4? What was their overall SEC record? I know it was that one year, and I can't think of the year. What was that, Chris?
It was 2013, and it was 26-3. They had a game rained out at South Carolina after winning the first two. And looking
back on that's I don't know if that'll ever happen again. I mean, and I thought about that this weekend on vacation. I was trying to remember the record, but when you think of what happened that year and what ended up happening as far as finishing out, but that's something I don't think that will ever happen again. Pretty impressive.
No, I don't think that'll happen in our lifetimes. I'm looking at Boyd'sWorld.com. Boyd Nation runs a really good site. He has his own set of computer rankings, which are power rankings independent from the RPI. I think they're kind of slanted towards the West Coast, but I think they're the best ones that we have. He also runs his own version of the RPI. I use Warren Nolan because they run it off Game Tracker, and it basically stays almost up to the minute now, at least that for RPI. But Boyd's World runs this thing called RPI Needs Report, and what it does is, I guess, it looks at where everybody is and where the RPIs are. I don't know if it tries to project ahead a lot, but I think it treats everybody the same at least. And being in the top 16 of the RPI is not a slam dunk to host. It's not always required, but generally if you're there, you've got a great shot to host, unless there is a good reason that you shouldn't. And same thing with top 8, with the national seed. Right now, Vanderbilt needs to win 4 to 5 games in the regular season. This does not include tournaments, which, of course, we cannot project, and the Pac-12 does not have a tournament, which could factor in one way or the other. Vanderbilt, according to Boyd's World, needs 4 to 5 wins to clinch a top 16 RPI spot, 7 to 9 to clinch a top 8. That's the lowest range of games of any team out there. Now, having said that, you've got some teams on the West Coast that have more regular season games. For instance, Stanford still has 21 to go, I believe. UCLA still has 19. So those teams may need to win a few more games. They also have a few more to play. But again, you combine that with the fact, Chip, that the toughest part of their schedule is over. They've got 2 of the 3 worst teams in the league coming up in South Carolina and Kentucky. Those are on the road. And then the 2 home series are teams that are middle of the pack at best, Missouri and Auburn. I hate to say that if you win 4 to 5 games, you guarantee hosting, because sometimes, let's say they end the season on a collapse and lose a bunch in a row. The NCAA may take that in consideration, but at least according to the math, they're 4 to 5 wins away from clinching a host, especially if that's getting above 500 in the league, and 7 to 9 away from almost clinching a national seed. It's, again, I think they are in the best shape of anybody to go, and it's kind of good to go into Hoover maybe if you can do that, knowing that you really have finished your work, and maybe you're just playing for bragging rights.
Right, and I think the staff will have them, having a little bit of unfinished business to do and making sure that doesn't happen, as far as not making it abundantly clear that they're a national seed. I mean, I don't think there's any way they don't host right now, but even if the bottom fell out a little bit, but getting that national seed, the more favorable schedule, and I read your article that you did a great job on as far as the summary on the website, as far as, Commodore's in great shape for national seed part 1 and 2. They're great stories, but the thing that stood out to me, there was this difference as far as the RPI and the rankings are concerned, is Western baseball is definitely, on the uprise this year, at least with UCLA, and you've got Oregon State and Santa Barbara. Those teams are usually in the top 16, top 20, but they, in Stanford, I forgot about them. I mean, they're having a good season as well. So you're seeing it's almost like an SEC Pac-12 dominance of all those categories. And we'll see when it finishes out how that, because you mentioned that not having the tournament, I guess, is in their favor a little bit. But you wonder who will shake out, and if it'll be, and how they place the teams as far as the super regionals, if it's going to be one dominated by those 2 conferences.
Chip, I think the other thing that will be interesting is watching what happens down the stretch. We've talked about the lineup all year and how guys have moved in and out. Now, Pat DeMarco is back and hit the ball well in spells this weekend. Cooper Davis is out. I would presume he'd be returning at some point in the next few weeks. We've talked about that. We've talked about potentially moving Mason Hickman and Patrick Raby, swapping those guys with each other. We've talked about bullpen and how that's been an issue at times and looked great at other times. As Vanderbilt goes down the stretch heading into the NCAA tournament, what are the key things, whether it's something along those lines or something else entirely, that you will be watching?
Staying healthy. I mean, having one guy out of the lineup is one thing. You mentioned Davis has been injured. You had DeMarco before, and that was plugged in by guys that was almost seamless as far as the replacements. And then if they could just not have multiple players go down, you get a hamstring pull, you get an arm that's not feeling well towards the end of the season, you get a guy missing a start. Those are things that would start to be troubling. But we've talked about this now for 3-4 weeks. I mean, it's an excess of riches. I mean, Corbin and his staff to get guys who can just go in and play and not miss a beat. And you got a kid who's been out for several weeks in DeMarco and hits a bomb off the center field ice screen the first time he's up. I mean, how often does that happen? So it's definitely something that they've had some guys banged up, but you've had some guys missed. Austin Martin missed some games, and for various reasons, players have been out, but it hasn't been like in years past where they've had 2-3 guys. You've had a guy's arm who didn't work out towards the end of the year, and they had to hold him back. That's happened. And knock on wood, that has not happened, and they're able just to plug some guys in positions. So there's really no drop-off, and that's what the main thing that, friends of mine who follow Vanderbilt and former players, we just joke, is just they plug a guy in and you don't even think about the guy who's injured because you forget that they're even in the lineup. I mean, I don't know, looking at the box scores, I mean, you have a guy like Gonzalez didn't even get an at-bat this weekend. And he was a guy that was counted on several weeks ago and had some great defensive plays. He had some good at-bats. And he didn't even get an at-bat this week against Alabama in conference play. So things like that, I think, are the keys. Staying healthy, staying almost driven to trying to catch. If I'm coaching this team, I'm saying, I know they don't mention Omaha. I know it's in the back of their mind, but having a goal that, all right, we need to catch Georgia and take care of our business, and maybe that'll happen. And trying to get that regular season championship, having something to play for going down the stretch. So just staying healthy, I think, is the main thing, the concern that I'm looking for. And mentioning last week, that third starter, I think, it's hard to believe that a guy has, and granted, he's been around for a long time, but when you got Patrick Raby, who's now one win away from catching Jeff Peoples as the all-time wins leader at Vanderbilt, is incredibly impressive for a guy who's now slid down to your third spot. I will say I've always paid attention, Chris, to that fourth starter, that midweek starter. And that's just been an important part of this team in years past. And the average fan might not understand that. But when you have a Mason Hickman who is 5-0 with under 2 ERA, able to close out a regional or come in if somebody struggles in a super regional, and he's got confidence and he's got wins under his belt, that is enormous because, Indiana State is no slouch, and he pitched really well during the week this week. And I think I read, and I'm not sure, on your site, someone transcribed a little bit about what happened in Corbin's press conference or at the Commodore call-in show this weekend. And I think one of the posters mentioned that it was discussed perhaps replacing Raby on Sunday, and Corbin vetoed it and said he wanted Raby to start. Didn't hear it, so I'm not sure, but it's been thought of. But when you get a guy who's won 27 career games going down the stretch, and he's able to pitch in a regional or super regional, that's a big time bonus. So I'm not worried about it as much as I was a couple weeks ago. I think Raby, there was no runs given up by him at all on Sunday. Pitched pretty solid. Look at his line. I mean, it's something that is going to bode very well for this team going down a stretch. Having a guy like with his experience, I mean, he walked 4, struck out 8 in 6 innings, and that's deeper than he's gone in the last couple of weeks. And probably, Brownie and Corbin, and that's the staff was looking for him to go deeper. That's been his knock. He hasn't been able to go deep in games, and gives them 6 innings on Sunday, which was impressive.
You and I have followed Tim Corbin ever since he has been at Vanderbilt, and we know he is a creature of habit. Now, he's changed with some things, but he generally likes guys to have roles and stick in them, and particularly in pitching. And you always hear him before regionals talking about he doesn't like to change things up because he feels like it could send the wrong message. So I guess I'm not shocked that he is going to keep Raby in the 3 spot, or at least maybe that's not a prediction, but has so far, has not been inclined to move him out. I want to ask you something. Patrick is not overpowering, but he knows how to pitch. He consistently, throughout his career, does not get hit hard. But the thing that kind of puzzles me with him he had a really good strikeout to walk rate, really a low walk rate when he first got here. I think he was walking under 3 batters per 9. That's almost doubled this year, and it was an issue last year. What has been the deal with him being unable to throw strikes? You're a former pitcher. Is there something mechanical, something with approach? That's the one thing about him that I don't get is it's like he gets to the 5th or 6th inning, he's already closing in on 100 pitches because he's having to throw so many. That's the part about him I don't understand why that has changed.
Not sure. I mean, it could be mechanics. I know that obviously Coach Brown has worked on those with him, and nobody wants to go out there and not throw strikes. I mean, sometimes you can be too cute and try to do too many things instead of in your role, Chris. And of course, being a Sunday starter, you know that normally, I mean, he threw 101 pitches in 6 innings on Sunday, but that's probably what they expected and what they wanted. But I don't really have an answer for him. I'm not sure if something happened in the off season, coming back for that senior campaign, not going in the draft or not accepting an offer in the draft, whether that had to do anything with it. But I think that pitchers go through, being a former pitcher, you go through cycles where certain things are working and certain things aren't. And it's just some of it can be psychological, some of them can be physical. But I think you'll see Raby. I like the move. I do think that Rocker is a guy who in the 2 slot, he has flourished the last couple weekends. I think his confidence level's up, and he's obviously a raw talent and a rare talent at the same time. So I think that's and I don't see any drop off as far as attitude or facial expressions or body language as far as with Raby and not accepting that role. I think he's bought into that. He's been here 4 years, and seniors are a rarity in this program, especially seniors who are winning games and being starters in the conference. Usually those guys get replaced by younger players as the recruiting classes stack. So not really sure there. I mean, it could be a multitude of things, but I think as we see here, if he can, pound the strike zone and give them 100 pitches, 6 inning outings like he did on Sunday, I think that's what his expectations are right now.
One other thing that's occurred to me, and again, we've talked about depth and guys on the bench who can play that don't have chances. I'm watching how they line up for next year, and you could have potentially a Rocker, Hickman, Becker weekend pitching lineup, which is better probably than what they have right now. You could have Tyler Brown as your closer. They've got a ton of arms that they can use in middle relief, guys that will develop. Ethan Smith, who could also start, by the way. You look around the team, you could go, say, Duvall at catcher. I don't know if you want to go Martin somewhere, whether that's shortstop, second base, first base. Gonzalez would be at third, I would think. I don't know who you fill in with middle infield, but they've got enough guys where that could happen. Maybe John Malcolm or Justin Henry Malloy factor in there somewhere too. The outfield, you figure you get Davis and DeMarco back and probably Isaiah Thomas. All of a sudden you're looking at this team, and it looks to me like this is going to be a top 5 bunch heading into next year too.
And you've mentioned a bunch of guys who haven't even gotten at bats lately, Chris. I mean, it's incredible to me, and in the recruiting process that Corbin does and his staff. One of the hard things that I probably would think if I were opposing coach, I would use against this staff and this team and coming here is why don't you need to come to my school X, because you're not going to play for the first 2 years at Vanderbilt. You're going to get limited at bats there. And I'm sure some people have used that against him because his whole mantra has been, your positions are not owned, they're rented, and you've got a bunch of kids who could play anywhere else in the country and probably start, and they're not getting those reps. So that's always been a magical. There's been 2 things about Tim Corbin and his crew that amaze me above anything else. Number one, how he pieces together scholarships. And I know that Vanderbilt has some advantages with their financial aid, but being able to do that with Pell Grants and scholarships and athletic scholarships and academic, that is in itself just a whole nother level of, you'd have to have a whiteboard and have it covered with all the different scenarios. But number 2 is keeping everybody happy. I mean, when you have top 10 and top 5 and number 1 recruiting classes in the country, those kids have those rankings, for a reason. And then you got to bring all these kids and meld them together and have them be satisfied with sitting on the bench for long periods of time and not getting at bats. And that's been truly remarkable how he can do that. And there's some attrition every year because of it. These kids want to play. But do you weigh out the situations, say, I can come to Vanderbilt, get a great education, I can play perhaps in the College World Series and be successful and learn under this staff, or do I want to go and look out for myself and play somewhere else and get opportunities for me as an individual and go on through the draft? It's a tough thing, and it's amazing how they're able to do it, because you're mentioning kids that are literally not getting reps in games. I'm sure they are in practice, and they could be playing and starting at most other programs in the country.
I'm going to go to our mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters or landlord insurance, or life or commercial insurance? Call Josh at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at www.facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Make him yours as well. I think you're going to be very pleased if you do. Bex4VU says, I'd like to ask Chip the same question that you and New York Door discussed, since you have a different take being a pitcher and all. Since pitch counts seem to be a major factor in how long pitchers stay in the game, why are warm-up pitches between innings not counted? Assuming these take a toll on the arm just like game pitches, which is maybe a bad assumption, why don't they reduce the number of warm-up pitches to reduce fatigue?
Wow, that's a good question. Because you work as a pitcher, you work up a sweat, and before the game, there are various methods they use. The armbands. They do a little long toss. They do. You see some of these kids, and you've seen these videos where a lot of these guys will work up against a net, and that's usually on their off day, but throwing short distances, almost just throwing as hard as they possibly can to get loose. And that does take fatigue into place as far as your arm. I mean, you've got to take all those warm up pitches, long toss pitches for a game, getting loose. They all do, but in general speaking, there's data that show that in a game-like situation, that 110 pitch mark is where pitchers lose their art of dominating the game and being effective. So I don't know if it's a sense of, yes, I mean, that is taking in consideration it's not the 100 count mark is not taking that consideration, all those other things. And it does provide fatigue on your arm, but different guys I preferably like throwing about, mine was more of a time thing, working from the stretch and the wind up and making sure you're ready to throw when you get out there. But you do work up a sweat and you do get that kind of arm fatigue. So that's a great question. I've never really thought of it as far as that's concerned, but there's obviously real life, despite all those figures that he mentioned, as far as why isn't it taken into consideration, that in-game number, there's real live data that shows that in a game, that's the one that matters as far as when guys start losing their edge. But great question. That's a very good question.
81J says, I want Austin Martin and J.J. Bleday to get as many at-bats as possible. I would agree with that. So I like the move, batting Austin first and J.J. second. Only loss without order was the Arkansas Sunday game, which was 14-12, where you could hardly fault the offense. He wants to know your thoughts on what they've done with the batting order.
Yeah, it's funny the questions asked, because I watched the games this weekend, as I mentioned, in Florida on television and on the internet, and didn't really pick up the fact that Bleday was batting in the 2-hole. And I was like, wow, you've got a guy hitting 5 bombs on the weekend batting in the 2 slot. But there's different things about the way the coaching staff does that in all levels of baseball, whether it's getting those potential extra at bats, whether you're having the ability to throw around people. I mean, imagine if you sit there and you're in the lineup and you think you're going to throw around Austin Martin to get to J.J. Billaday. Well, that isn't happening. And, a lot of the coaches use the order left, right, or they'll throw a whole slew of lefties at a certain right-handed batter. There's a method to the madness. I do like it. It is unusual that you got a guy leading the country in home runs, batting in the 2-hole, but it definitely is. They've worked the numbers, and it makes the most sense. And you got a stout 1-2 punch there at the beginning of the order. And the way that he's been piecing together, I kind of like it. It goes against traditional baseball to not have J.J. Billaday being your cleanup batter, but obviously that kid doesn't have any problem with it as far as the way he's performing. And I don't know if you read the quote by the Alabama coach this weekend, Chris. There was a quote I saw it on Twitter or whatever, but his comment was he was just praising Billaday, and he said that young man, I'm paraphrasing here, should not be allowed to use an aluminum bat in a small ballpark. He saying it out of respect, just how it was almost like he was using a wiffle ball bat. I mean, balls going out of that place. And and I don't know if you saw the very interesting, if fans have not seen I think you can find it on the SEC Network website, but Kyle Peterson, who's with ESPN, former Stanford pro pitcher, who does a lot of broadcasts for games, did a batting practice. He calls it batting practice. I don't know. He'll go to a game and he'll take some guys and literally throw them BP and have a little interview with them. And he had Billaday as one of the players. And it was very, very interesting. Have you seen it yet, Chris?
I have not. I've heard people talk about it, and I think it was very well received.
Oh yeah, if you haven't seen it, you can check on the SEC website, or maybe it could be on your site. But it's a very informative, just laid back. I mean, he's literally in the cage in Vanderbilt's workout facility, throwing these guys VP and talking to them like, "What's your favorite restaurant in Nashville?" And he'll throw a pitch, and he'll say, "What do you think about? What's your memory for last year?" So I'm getting off track here, but I do think I like the way the lineup is right now. I think there's a way that they've crafted it where there's no pitching around guys, and it's pretty hard to deal with right now, especially with what happened with the balls that were going out of Sewell Thomas Park this weekend.
Yeah, here's what I love about it, and not that really any of their options are bad options, but say you get to a championship game in a regional or in Omaha or something like that, and it's tied or you're down one, and having J.J. Billaday hitting second instead of fourth, what that does is that may be the difference between him being the last at bat with your season on the line or not. And same with Austin Martin. I really love what they've done with that.
Yeah, and I think with Billaday, he's a rare talent. I don't think we have seen a batter who with these gaudy of numbers in a long, long time, and I think we need to appreciate it because you're going to look back on it. But some of the hitters that this school has had, I mean, this kid can explode anytime he's up at bat, and that's the way it looked like this weekend. It looked like it was men playing with children every time he was up, and of course he was the man. And it was just overmatching the Alabama pitching staff.
Last thought on the batting order. The only thing that I really have a big issue with is they're hitting Harrison Ray fifth. He's a right-hander. I get that they may be trying to break up that order. I would rather see, if you're going to do that with the right-hander, I would rather see it be Julian Infante, hit him in the middle there in the 5-hole, which, by the way, I think the last I checked, heading into last weekend, I think he had the highest slugging percentage on the team in league games, so he's really hit well against SEC teams. From a number standpoint, that makes sense, but I do wonder how much of that is with Julian so much has been mental. Maybe hitting him in the 9-hole is a way that they have kind of gotten him back, because if you're hitting in the 9-hole, there's not a lot of pressure on you, especially with the other bats in the lineup. Maybe that's the thinking. Statistically, I don't like it, but maybe it even makes sense from that standpoint.
Yeah, and you look at what Infante, and he hit an absolute bomb that's still traveling in the Tuscaloosa night. But, I just like where he's hitting, to be honest. I like him in that bottom. I mean, you're talking about a kid who had the sophomore year that was out of this world and looked like he was going to be a couple first 3-round pick, had the disastrous year last year, and then, coming back for his senior year, and he hits the bomb, then he strikes out 4 times on Sunday. And I think it's still a work in progress for him. I don't think he's there 100% yet. He's definitely changed where he's put his hands, and he's changed his stance. He's got more of his feet are real close together, and that gives him a lot of power when he does hit it, and perhaps laying off some bad pitches. But it's having the 4 strikeouts Sunday was a head scratcher after he did do so well, and almost like he was pressing a little bit. But I see your point about as far as Harrison, but I almost I think it's a good spot for Infante now in the bottom part, and we'll see how it develops over the last couple weekends when they get down the stretch.
Okay, Chip, I've got to run. I think you do as well. I know that you've got a thriving real estate business. I think that the Nashville market probably about to pick up again with school closing. Tell people about where they can find you and what you guys offer.
Sure, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. This is the time of year with the spring market, we call it, usually starts in late to mid-February. But now is the final push here. If you're thinking about selling your home, it's a good time to give one of our agents a call. Give me a call personally at our company. We have an office in Green Hills or Brentwood, because it's school closing. A lot of people want to wait until the end of the year to sell their home. So they're doing the math, and they're saying, well, if I put my house on the market in April, and in this market, sell it in 30, 45 days, that means we'll be able to ride out the school year and keep my kid where he is and then go on to the next home. So if you're thinking about that in any way, fashion, you give us a call. We'll line you up and show you what the market looks like in your specific neighborhood, your specific zip code. The market is still hot. We reach all areas of Middle Tennessee, Brentwood, Green Hills. We have a great presence in the Belle Meade area, West Nashville, Hendersonville, all the Middle Tennessee areas we have a reach for any of you, the customers listening to this, whether they're buying or selling a home. So give us a call. You can look us up on the web. You can search for frederickandclark.com. Lots of Vandy connections at our firm. We have principals who went there and played sports there. My late father, played basketball there. I played baseball there. Whit Clark, the Clark of Frederick and Clark, is a Vanderbilt graduate. My brother Steve is a Vanderbilt graduate. So lots of ties there. So give us a call. We'd love to help hook you up and sit down with you and find out what your customers' specific needs are as far as real estate, whether buying or selling.
Thanks for joining us, Chip.
Thanks. Have a great week.
All right, he's Chip Fridrich, former Vanderbilt baseball pitcher. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, we've got a free trial offer now through about the first week of August. Go to VandySports.com. Check that out. Support the podcast, support the site, and I think you'll love what you get. Okay, thanks for listening. We're back with other podcasts later in the week, and we'll see you then.